Michael's message. I went to a full weekend workshop at the Agape Spiritual Center in Los Angeles in early 2002. That Friday evening, as Brian began the first regression, I went immediately into a meditative state, from 0 to 60 in nothing flat. I recall taking myself into my grove, where I go when I meditate, and suddenly there was my grandfather. He was laughing and waving for me to come after him, so I followed and found myself at the staircase. I said, "But, Grandpa, you are getting ahead of Brian." He just laughed as he glided down the stairs, and naturally I followed, yelling for him to wait up the whole way. When we reached the bottom, there was a door. He opened it, pulled me in, and then smiled and disappeared. I cannot even describe the colors that I saw when I looked toward the light inside the door. I do not believe there is a human word that can encompass the beauty and serenity. I knew nothing but the names of the archangels. I had never studied about them or looked into their attributes. Yet somehow I knew that I was standing in the presence of Michael. I can still see him in that somehow colorless and color-filled light. I will never forget that moment. He stood, simply leaning with his forearms on his sword with his wings folded behind him. I, being as quiet and demure as always, said, "Well, that isn't a very angelic pose." He flipped the sword up and extended his wings, holding the sword aloft for a moment, and then flipped the sword back down and gave me a sardonic look. I felt him say, "Better," with a chuckle, and I said, "Much." A sardonic look. I felt him say, "Better," with a chuckle, and I said, "Much." I have no idea how much time passed before I heard Brian say, "Look at what is around you. Shouldn't you be showing me something?" I asked Michael, and I received an amused look as he pulled one wing in to show me myself in a glade in the woods, surrounded by animals, happy and alone as I took care of them. Then the wing moved back out, and once again all I saw was Michael. I heard Brian tell us to go to the end of the life. "Well," I said to Michael. Once again a wing moved, and I saw myself as an old woman with a walking stick, making my way into a city in either ancient Rome or Greece. I knew I was dying, and all I wanted was to reach the temple. When I did, I sighed, sat down on the marble steps, and died. It was so peaceful, no pain. I just needed to be at the temple when I died, and I was, so I was content. I asked Michael if there was anything I needed to know, and inside my mind I heard, "You are protected when you need to be." I then heard Brian counting upward from 1 to 10 to bring us out of the trance. I came out of the regression, and I have never since felt what I did at that moment. I have never before nor since experienced that kind of peace. Faith Susan, in my view, Michael's sword, which represents wisdom, cuts through and ends ignorance and fear. Without fear, we are able to embrace our spiritual nature, letting go of ego, pride, and jealousy. Without fear, we can love freely and practice compassion at all times. We will not be hurt. We do not have to suffer. Fat's grandfather was the transitional, loving, and familiar being who led her to a higher state of awareness. Michael met her in the light, just beyond the door. Her fears dissolved, there was only peace. Each one of us is protected when we need to be. Angels, guides, and gods belong not only to the Judeo-Christian tradition but to many of the world's great religions and cultures. During a group regression, a workshop participant named Keith recalled a very spiritual and emotional moment that had occurred when he was quite young, and as he spoke he described what he saw with childlike terms. He was a little boy when he witnessed the appearance of two guides or apparitions in his room. One was an old Chinese man with a long white beard, and the other was a kind of angelic figure. They took Keith to a much less dense place, a floating place, where people were coming and going with information and knowledge. Earth was far off in the background, and he could see how these people were arriving at and leaving it. They were not doing so in their physical bodies, but rather in their spiritual bodies, their energy bodies. Keith watched as they were drawn to this planet by ties to other souls. As he re-experienced this childhood memory, Keith was able to glimpse the bigger picture. He sensed how we come to and leave this denser world, and how we return to the floating place. We come to this school to learn our lessons, and then we return home. His account reminded me of another story, one of a young boy and a bearded Chinese man, which I recounted in my second book, Through Time into Healing. Born with congenital heart defects, a young boy required open heart surgery at ages 3 months, 2.5 years, and again at 5 years. The boy nearly died several times during the operations, and his doctors did not expect him to survive. When he was 8 years old, he revealed to his mother that while still unconscious after one of the surgeries, he had been visited in the intensive care unit by 8 Chinese guys, who conveyed information about his recovery. The boy observed that one of the Chinese men had a sword that he was always twirling around. This man frequently cut off his beard with the sword, but the beard grew back almost immediately. The boy described all 8 Chinese guys in detail. In researching her son's startling story, his mother found the physical and philosophical representation of her son's 8 Chinese guys. They are the PART-57 8 immortals, Taoist representations of historical figures who have attained immortality. As her son described, one of these is Lu Tungpin, the patron saint of barbers, who was granted a magic sword as a reward for overcoming 10 temptations. The boy claims that he is still visited by the 8 Chinese guys, who continue to provide him with information. This is his direct mystical experience of truth and guidance, which he accepts completely, joyfully, and unquestioningly, and which provides him with comfort in traumatic and frightening moments. Unencumbered with an adult's mental filter of what is right and wrong to think and believe, this child is able to accept both a direct source of guidance and a direct experience of spirituality. Unlike his very curious and well-intentioned mother, he has no need to research the facts. Another spiritual figure regarded by the Taoists as an immortal is Guanyin, or Kuan Yin, who is also venerated by Buddhists as the embodiment of mercy. A quintessential source of infinite and unconditional love, she graced the author of the story that you are about to read with her presence and, in doing so, changed her life forever. It is said that, in the belief system of Chinese Buddhists, the mindful state of feeling at peace with oneself and with others is Guanyin. The very principles of loving kindness and compassion are Guanyin. To feel, behave, and think in accordance with these values is Guanyin, and the person who does so is Guanyin. The world in its current state. Soulmate, this is a part of Zindagi Ki Roshni consultancy. It has been established for those who have lost someone and for those who are very sad in their life. About 100 PDF books and 20 short audio books of this topic will be sent to those who join it. This data will be sent to their email or WhatsApp. If you want to join this organization, then please send WhatsApp message to this number.